One of the other things that we did on the first week of school is we talked a lot about equity grading. And so where is this coming from? Equity grading, last year, we learned about how we grade and what we grade. A lot of these conversations started at the grade level teams and through the departments. And so last year we started having conversations about the data and using the data to inform our decisions. And we realized that our grades weren't the best, and many students, one can be too many students dug holes for themselves that were hard to come out of. So discussions around grading practices sprang out of department data discussions and in the 9th to 10th grade level meetings. So we also looked at, what do we put into gradebook? What does an assessment look like? What does it grade? How does an assessment impact how we deliver instruction or how we adjust our instruction? What are we looking at as far as mastery is concerned? Are we doing things just because that's the way it's been done before, or are we actually trying to do things to assess how students are learning and meeting their needs? How does grading approach get in the way of supporting students' learning? Maybe sometimes the way we look at grading and the way we assign grades, or the importance we assign grades, sometimes gets in the way of allowing us to really see what the students' needs are and adjust to them. Sometimes those structures that we set in place are the same structures that cage us and hold us from being creative or thinking outside that box. And then one of the biggest areas is, how do my category weights, assignment point values, and number of assignments all play into one another to generate a grade? The challenge with grading is that grading is very, very, very personal for the teacher. Grading is something that the teacher has that absolute control over. They decide how many assignments they're going to give. Some teachers give, I'm exaggerating, but some teachers give 200 or 300 assignments in a quarter, and they're all worth 5 points. And another teacher could give maybe 10 assignments, and they're all worth 100 points apiece. Some people give assignments and they give points for every single little thing. Others, they like doing one assignment over a long period of time in order for students with different parts, so students can show their mastery or accomplishing different parts. So teachers have that autonomy to decide that. Of course, they work in departments to decide what that structure looks like. But sometimes the way we assign points to something can have a big impact on the outcome of the total number of points at the end. So, for example, if a teacher has, let's say, 50 assignments that students are completing throughout the semester, but they have 2 or 3 exams that are worth 100 points apiece, and it's weighted as 60% of your grade comes off of these tests, and the student's just having a bad day, or they don't test well, or they get nervous. If they bomb those tests, there's no way, no matter how many 100% they get on the assignment, other assignments, there's no way they can get out of that hole. So these are all the questions that we were bringing up last year, and these conversations, like, again, we're coming up in the ILT, at the grade level, and departments. So one of the things that a lot of different school districts, schools in Chicago, including schools in our area, a lot of things that have been considered is looking at what equity grading looks like. So if you look at this scale, the default scale in gradebook for Chicago Public Schools, for an A, 90 to 100% is an A, 80 to 90% is a B, 70 to 80% is a C, and 60 to 70% is a D, and anything below 60 is an F. So what happens? Let's say this was especially evident during the pandemic. Let's say we had a student, and I'm giving a very an example that maybe is not so common, but let's say we had a student who at the beginning of the pandemic had a death in the family, and they just couldn't focus, and they were disconnected from school. We were able to get connections with them. We were able to call them, talk to them. We were able to get them to engage little by little. But by the time the semester came, the end of the semester, let's say they only started really turning stuff in the last 5 weeks, because the first 10 weeks, they just couldn't bear with school. No matter if they received a perfect score on every single thing, and they did every single thing our extra credit teacher asked for, they would never get higher than, let's say, a 30% or 40%. Now, the question is that fair? Is that equitable when you're looking at, if we're talking about looking at each child for their particular situation and working with them, we're telling them that what happened in your past, that's going to haunt you the rest of your school year. There's no way you're going to get out of that hole, no matter if you do everything. So how does that motivate the student to continue to engage or to do better? It doesn't. So the same thing, like another way to look at this is if you have bills and you have credit card debt or something happens, you're on the verge of bankruptcy, and in bankruptcy, they give you the opportunity to renegotiate some of your debt and help to get out of that hole so that you can be successful and try to get on the right path again. But when we have a scale for the grade letter of F from 0 to 60, and the student is at the lower end, there's possibly no hope for that student. So what's the motivation for them to continue going forward? So what we wanted to do is, we've been reading some research and some books about grading equity. And one of the suggestions in grading equity is basically, actually, let me go back up here, is taking this category of F, and the same way, in order to move from grade to grade to grade, we're proposing that the cutoff for an F be 50 to 60%. And I'm going to explain how that looks a little bit later, how we enter assignments for that. So if a student is not turning anything in, and we give them a point, let's say 45 points or 45% as equivalent to a 0, then they only need to do their assignments, and they can show progress and jump up into, they're still in the F category, but if they continue to do their work, they can get closer to a B or C or a D or even an A. But if there's all the way down here and they're getting 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, there's almost like a penalty that they're getting, and they'll never be able to recover out of that. So here's a simulation, and I won't spend too much time on it, but if you see here, this is an actual grade book for semester 2 for a teacher. As you can see, there's here 0 points, 5, 10, 15, 20, all the way to 95% and 100. These are the amount of students here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, of how many received a particular letter grade. So from this range, 0 to 55, there are 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 students who have an F. You have 6.
I'm sorry, that's how it looks for one classroom.
For one class, correct. In this category right here, you have 6 students who have more of a 60%. One student has a 65. So you have 7 students in this range. You have 5, 6 students in the C range. And you have 3 students in the B range and 3 students in the A range. If we take that scale that I just presented and we move these, take off these zeros and put them in as a 45. Now remember, an F is still 50% to 60%. So we're not saying we're giving you an A. We're just saying we're going to make that 0 or that F a little bit higher up as a starting point.
Percentage of it.
Right. So if you see that, we still have 4, 5, 6 students still in the F range. We didn't give away a grade. Those students who chose to do nothing are still receiving an F. But one student did move into the D category, and you did have some students who were able to move all the way into the C category because the gap was a lot less, and they weren't being punished for getting their act together and maybe getting over some of their challenges or getting over whatever it was that they were going through. They're not being penalized for that. The A's stayed about the same. So I'll just go back and forth so you can see the numbers real quick. You can see the graph. If you look at the A's, 90 to 95%, that still stayed the same. The B's increased by 2, I think. And the C's increased a little bit more. And the D's actually went down, so there was a little bit of increase into the C's. But the F's pretty much remained the same. So this false notion of you're giving away grades is not necessarily, it's not the truth. What we're doing is giving the students more of an opportunity to get out of that hole to meet challenges and their circumstances. So, oh yeah, and you know what I should have put on here. So with the no zero policy, basically, in order for us to know what's the difference between a student who didn't turn in an assignment versus turned in something, is by assigning the zero grade as a 45. Because we know if we see that grade, you can make the assumption that was an assignment that wasn't turned in. If a student turned in an assignment, they would have 50% or higher. It's still an F, but minimum 50% or higher.
Well, think about the momentum. A zero makes you feel, I guess a 45 it's a not, yeah, I get it.
It's still enough, but at least it makes you feel like
I'm almost
it's
there.
attainable. I can do
I'm
something
almost
about
there.
it.
Gives you
Right.
hope that I'm closer to
Right.
the 70, right?
But that student that decides, absolutely not, I'm not going to do anything, that's not going to make a difference, whether it's a 45 or a zero. It's,
Right, but they're still not gonna do anything.
right.
You could either just stay there or do
Yeah.
extra.
Or do better. But for that one struggler, like, that needs a little extra, yeah.
And so, equity grading, what is it? Students attempting an assignment, they receive a minimum grade. Minimum grade of 50. You try, you get a 50. 50 is still an F. So it's not like we're saying here you're getting a B or C. You're still getting an F if you just tried. But the opportunity to get a better grade, the opportunity to be motivated to try to do extra credit or redo my assignment, because I know there's an actual benefit where I'm going to see the benefit, is higher for the student. Students who don't complete an assignment, they receive a slightly different minimum grade, which is a 45. It eliminates zero in the grade book. The rationale is it levels the playing field by making all the grade bands the same size. Zeros artificially lower a student's grade on other assignments in the cumulative average. It eliminates the penalty of receiving a zero. So if the example I gave earlier, a student could have all their work in showing mastery and all the skills, they take one test or they have a few assignments with a zero, instead of just dropping them slightly, it drops them by that whole scale of 50%. So it penalizes them for getting that zero. Maybe they missed an assignment or whatever it may be, and it basically artificially penalizes them. So that's what it's trying to say. Eliminates the penalty of receiving a zero. We surveyed the teachers. We had discussions in departments, grade levels. It was brought up at the grade level, introduced to me by the teachers in that grade level, our programmer, our assistant principal, and they decided they wanted to move forward with equity grading. I support them in that decision. We talked about how to structure grade book. The only thing is, when looking at equity grading, we can't say that each teacher can do their own thing in order for it to be effective and to make sure everybody understands it. So what we decided to do is we're going to implement it starting at freshman grade level. Sophomores, teachers can try it, and I'm going to show you that in a second. And juniors and seniors are going to continue with the regular scale that they're used to. So the minimum grade is 50. So if you're a freshman and you attempt your assignment, you get a minimum of 50. Missing grade is 45, and we wanted it in the syllabus. Unfortunately, Aspen can't be set up to enter a 45% for a missing grade. It's automatically a zero, so we have to enter a 45% so that we know that's a zero. This is just how to convert assignments. 100-point assignment, if it's 50%, when I say a 50, then you would enter a 50. If you give a 20-point assignment and it's 50%, then it would be 10 points. If we give a 10-point assignment and they are 50%, then it's 5 points. So that was just this is what we shared with the teachers, actually, with the whole staff. So freshmen, we're going to start equity grading with them, and we're going to roll it out year after year after year as they go to the next level. It'll stay with them. And sophomores, we're allowing the teachers to get comfortable with this practice, because usually our sophomore or junior or senior teachers will usually stay at that level. So when they get to sophomores next year, then they will be already familiar with this. Juniors and seniors are going to remain with the current practices.
Bendito.
Well, I mean, they're used to it, right? They're used to it, yeah.
Of course you said it.
So,
Almost out the door.
I said a lot, and the rest of it is probably a little bit less, but are there any questions before I go on to the next part?
I like the equity grading. I feel it's gonna give a different, like, momentum to the younger students and see themselves succeeding, you know?
Yeah,
I mean,
and Sergeant?
I see it both ways. I mean, I do see it both ways. I think that the great thing is people used to say grades and then standardized test scores, they never match anyway. So people can say, well, you can't see one indicator versus the other. In actuality, most students that score lower on have a higher standardized test scores. I see it both ways. I mean, I really do. I like it now that, just to communicate to the parents, because Aspen is our communication with parents and just making sure that they know, 45 is a symbol of zero, not doing anything. I do if I did have one concern, I think that if teachers say, you know what, and honestly, I do believe it is giving some things. A lot of students, they do have empathy. They do understand these things. They do. But if they say, well, you know what, you started at 45, I'm not giving you a break any longer. And so maybe it may take that part of that away in some aspects. But I think in most cases, our teachers do pretty well. And I, the bad thing about some of this is some of our students adjust to try to abuse the system. But again, just because they're doing that, just like we talk about some of the students, whether you come to school at 8 o'clock or 7:45, they're gonna come late. We have to do what's best for the whole. And I do think that me saying anything negative about I'm one of those individuals. If our teachers vote for something, I'm with them. I voice my opinion. And you hear people saying, if a student has an IEP, automatically they don't have far to go to be to a grade. But everything's created equal when it's all said and done. I think for every bad thing I can say about this, there's something good you can say. And I just think we ask our students to be open-minded, and I think it would be hypocritical of me to say that I'm not open-minded of this process. And I like how we're doing with our freshmen and certain things like that. There are some confusion, for instance, and I would say this: it's okay if you don't do the 45 assignments, but if you're doing a formative assessment, that score is that score. For instance, our uniforms are formative assessments. So what is those scores? And so that's had to be some communications. There's still some things we have to work out, and we have to get there. You know what I mean?
It's not 100% perfect. Some schools have taken years to implement something like this. We're at the beginning stages, and honestly, I don't want to demotivate our freshman teachers who really latched onto this and believe it's the right way to go. I will acknowledge there's not 100% agreement at the freshman level. Some teachers will take time, but there's a certain point where we have to either be united in the way we implement it or not. And so, sometimes that does come down with policy, in which we've decided the freshman level as a whole is going to implement it this year. And we're going to reassess after first semester and second semester and see where we're at.
And I would say the number one reason, and I say every good thing is a bad thing, and because it's change people are always. But I think the number one reason I do like it for freshmen is they're coming from a school where they had 5 classes, 4 classes, and now they get into a class where they have a possible 7 homework a night.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to do this, you should assign, like some schools do, say, okay, English, you're only going to assign assignments on this night. And I think it provides our students because time management, come here to the culture shock. And I think it provides our students an opportunity to get, acclimatized, adjusted to, high school. And I just think that, and I said the word death sentence, a 0, honestly, is a death sentence in most cases. It is. And one thing I would say about, not the grading skill, but I've been teaching a long time, honestly. And if it wasn't for Mr. Hawthorne talking about how, and I, kind of wondering how if you give 1 or 2 assignments in that one category, how it drops this grade. I mean, I'm telling you, me and a couple of teachers would say we was not intentionally, but we're violators of that because we didn't know. I mean, we really didn't know, and I think that was one of the best PDs or best conversations we've had. And that was last year. I think
It was,
end of the previous year.
so
And that-
one of the conversations I said leading up to this was, doing simulations, Mr. Hathorn did simulations for the teachers, showing them like, okay, these are your categories, these are your assignments. By giving a student a 0 here, this is what it does to the grade. But if you eliminate the 0 and you look at the performance, where do you think the student is? Well, I think that's a A, B student. But as soon as they had that 1 0, they dropped to a D student because of the weight of a particular assignment. So there's a lot of a lot of math that goes behind this, but it also focuses in on what is the efficacy for the student behind they're around being successful, around having opportunities. What are we saying to students if you say you make one mistake and you're doomed, you're done? In any job, all of us, we don't meet a deadline. We're not automatically at a 0. You're not going to get paid for 3 weeks or so on and so forth, or you're going to have to work for free until the next quarter. We have flexibility, we have deadlines, we have makeup opportunities, as long as we can show growth. And so it's the same with our students. We talk about empathy, we talk about working with them, meeting them where they're at, but our grading system doesn't necessarily reflect that.
Some great discussions. I would tell you that students, and I'm telling you, I was educated even by students. Students say, and I would tell you, I have very few failures, honestly. I had students tell me, and this is me, I can't talk about nobody else. I had an A in your class, and now I have a C or D. And it was because they didn't do something or really low scoring. And I looked and I only had a few assignments in that category. This is me now. And I said, and I asked myself, I said, what happened? And I couldn't figure it out. But after, the conversation with Hawthorne and everything else, but I understand I did make an adjustment with the student grade because it wasn't fair, but I didn't know what was going on. I thought grade book was just out of whack. But it was the way we was, let me have 2 assignments in this category and all the other assignments had, many of them. And so it took that, professional development for me to understand.
Yeah, I know I'm a parent and